he had come home for lunch, and which he just didn't do. You know, he didn't have time to come home for lunch. But I guess God seemed fit that I need to see him one more time, because he called me and said, "Could you fix me something for lunch? I want to come home for lunch." So I said, "Sure." So I fried some potatoes and made a tuna sandwich, and I had his lunch ready time he got there. So he ate and left, and said he had to leave because the president was coming to town, and you know. But at least we got to see him, because I had gone to the school to pick up Alan. The oldest boy had gotten sick at school, and I went to get him, or else he would have heard the announcement on the television and at the school, on the intercom at the school. So I was glad he was home instead of there. So Jetty's sister called me in a little bit and said, "Have you heard from Jetty?" And I said, "Yeah, he was here for lunch about an hour ago." And she said, "Well, I want you to call the police department. Nobody's called you." "No, nobody's called." She said, "Well, you call the police department." So when I called, they told me on the phone that he had been killed and he was dead, which is something they never, ever do. But there was so much confusion that day that nobody was doing what they were supposed to do. So he told me on the phone, and that's the way I found out about it. Well, he called me in the evening, and there was a bunch of people there, and Jetty's real good friend was there, and he answered the phone. So when he did, he called me and said, "Robert Kennedy wants you on the phone." So I went to the phone, and Mr. Kennedy said he wanted to express his sympathy for my loss, that he realized that if his brother hadn't have come to Dallas, that my husband would still be alive. And I said, "Yes, you're right, he would still be alive." But they were both doing their jobs. And he had to be his job as a president, and Jay had his job as a policeman, and so they were both doing their job. Well, I was very impressed with it, because she wrote in the letter that she had lit a flame for Jack, and that it would burn forever, and she would consider that it was burning for my husband too. He was a good Christian man, that he was a family man, a hard-working man that worked extra jobs to take care of his family, and that he was a Christian man. He loved his wife and kids so much, and he showed us every day. And that he was a good officer. Everybody after he was gone that I spoke to said he was a good officer. But I knew that because I was a wife at home that was seeing the things he was doing and heard about what was going on. So I appreciated knowing that he was doing a good job at the job that he liked, something he liked.
Thank you. On the behalf, Mrs. Tippit, on the behalf of the citizens of Allen and the Allen Public Library and our guests, I cannot express how sorrowful we are that you lost your husband on November 22nd, 1963. I'm very humbled and honored that you're here, and I'm so sorry that you've carried this burden for 55 years, and thank you for coming tonight. I would like to introduce Chief Brian Harvey of the Allen Police Department.
Well, it's an honor to be here tonight and share a stage with Marie Tippit, and this is the first time that I've ever met her, and it is a tremendous honor. I was with DPD for 32 years, and I hired on in 1979, so it was about 16 years after the murder of JD. And so there were still a lot of officers there. There were still a lot of stories from people that had different experiences that day. And I remember seeing on our wall of honor, I've looked at JD for 32 years. So I feel a connection because we wore the same badge. And the officers have not forgotten JD Tippit. But we were visiting earlier, and I think in all the chaos of that day, I think sometimes the family gets forgotten and sometimes gets lost. And I know that in my 32 years, unfortunately, we buried other officers, and I think we've gotten better in law enforcement, and I think we've gotten better as a society at understanding the emotional toll that it takes when you have a traumatic loss like that. And I know we're very quick these days. When an officer falls in the line of duty, we get chaplains, we get counselors, we get the family, we get the surviving spouse. We hook them into survivor groups like COPS, Concerns of Police Citizens. And I don't think that was the case in 1963, and I think that's part of the story. I think part of the story is the strength that Marie Tippit had to raise 3 children on her own and get through that indescribable, excruciating pain and grief that never does leave. And I think she's going to address that tonight. And I think that part of the story, part of remembering JD, is to remember the tremendous strength and grace that Marie Tippit has, and the family and the friends and the faith that got her through, raised her 3 children, and got her here today. On November 22nd, J.D. Tippit was doing his job, and after the shooting of the president, you heard I guess they didn't have it in the video montage, but there was a description that came out over the radio. White male, slender build, about 5'8", 165 pounds, and a dispatcher had noticed that all the Oak Cliff elements, the Oak Cliff officer cars, and Oak Cliff, for those of you that aren't familiar with Dallas, is in the southwest corner of Dallas, and a lot of the Oak Cliff cars had gone to downtown because of the assassination of the president, and a dispatcher noticed that the cars had drained out of Oak Cliff, so he was redeploying some of the cars that were left in Oak Cliff, and he redeployed J.D. Tippit and another officer to the central Oak Cliff part, which put J.D. in that area around 10th and Patton. And at 39 years old with 11 years on the department, J.D. Tippit knew the area. He was a hard-working officer. By all accounts, he was a hard-working officer. He knew the citizens. He knew his area. He was friends with the citizens. A lot of respect from the citizens. All spoke highly of him. He was a Christian. He was a family man. He loved his family, and he was doing his job. And when he approached Oswald, he was doing his job. And the officers that walked in with Marie are patrol officers, just like J.D. Tippit is. And when they leave here, they'll go back out on the street just like J.D. Tippit did, and just like 750 to 850,000 officers do across the country all year, day in and day out, in about 17,985 different agencies. There's a historical marker at 10th and Patton in Oak Cliff that describes the incident. And it says that in 1964, Officer Tippit was posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor from the Police Hall of Fame, the Police Medal of Honor, the Police Cross, and the Citizens Traffic Commission Award of Heroism. Officer Tippit made a difference. Officer Tippit made a difference in the department. He made a difference with the patrol officers, the partners that he worked with. He made a difference with his family. He made a difference in Oak Cliff. And that historical marker concludes, and it says, Officer Tippit's actions and subsequent murder at this site at 10th and Patton are remembered for setting into motion a series of events that directly led to Oswald's arrest. And I would say on November 22nd, Officer Tippit made a difference to the nation. So it is my profound honor to be on this stage, to be part of this program. And Marie, it's an honor to meet you. Thank you very much.
Okay, as you all know, I'm Marie Tippit, and I want to tell you something about my life and my day that day in 1963 when Jetty was killed. I know you've probably heard it a lot of times, but you hadn't heard it from me. So I want to tell you. I grew up in Red River County, and Jetty did too, and it's kind of the same neighborhood. And we had known each other. I'd seen him, but I didn't really associate with him until I was, in Clarksville. I was downtown, and he got back from the service, and was sitting in his car out on the square, and I was walking around with my mother, bored to death, and so she said, "Well, why don't you go there and invite the Tippit boy to church tonight?" And so I went over and invited him to church, and he showed up. And so from that time, we were dating, and wasn't too long until we decided to get married. It was hard to find a place to live back then, and we moved to Dallas, of course. And from that, with his sister and her husband, and then from that he got different jobs, but he kept talking about getting on the police force, as he had a friend of ours had moved from the country up to Dallas, and also he'd gotten on the force. And Jay said, "Well, I want to be that." So first I kind of talked him out of it. And he came back and was talking about it again, and I said, "I think that's what your heart and mind is set on, and I'm behind you 100%, whatever you want to do." And so that began our life as a police family. And it's not exactly an easy thing, because you got all these different times that you have to go through, that maybe they're working late nights and days and then evenings, and so they have a hard job. And there's no doubt about that. And so what you'd like to hear about, I guess, is the 1963 tragedy that happened to Kennedy and the world and my husband. And because of his alertness, I was told that they felt that he was very alert officer, and that he had noticed something strange about this man, so he stopped him. And as the chief had told you all a while ago, that's what happened. So I had been so blessed, I feel like, because usually Jetty didn't get to come home for lunch. But that day, he stopped and called me and said, "Could you fix lunch for me today?" Said, "I want to come by the house and have lunch. And I was babysitting a little boy, and I said, sure. So God must have knew that I needed to see him one more time, because he came home, and on the way, before he got there, I really got busy, because I made some fried potatoes and cooked those and fixed a sandwich and made some iced tea. And so he had got to come home and eat. And in the meantime, Alan had gotten sick at school, the oldest boy, and I went and picked him up. And he was there, so he got to see him. And my son Curtis was like 18 days being 5, so he was at the house. And so the boys got to see him one last time. And little did we know that when he walked out that door, that the next time we heard anything about him from him, that he was dead. So the television was blasting. Alan had that on because the president was there. He had the radio going. And if I hadn't have gone and gotten him when I did, he would have ended up hearing that message over the intercom at the school. So I'm very thankful for that he was at home. So I told him to unplug the radio, and we had the radio and the television both going, so I said, just unplug one of those. And so he did, and carried the radio back to the bedroom, or we would have heard the announcement, I guess, on the television, because Jay's sister called me and said to call the police department, that I needed to talk to them. And so I called, and like he said, the man told me on the phone that he had been killed. And I'm glad that Alan was at the house rather than being somewhere else. But the police department didn't have a habit of ever telling you something like that. They went and got you and carried you to the hospital or something. But with all the chaos that was going on that day, he had told me on the phone. So it was just so unreal and so unbelievable to have lost the love of my life. I just didn't see how it was going to carry on. But God takes care of us if we reach out to him, and I would never have made it had it not been for depending on. I said a lot of prayers, believe you me. So then I had the 3 children that needed me, and we done the best we could. So as time marked on, I do have some questions that Mr. Renner had asked me to tell y'all about, so I want to be sure that I don't forget those. So I wanted to take a peek at that. So I wanted to tell you about Jetty's career. He really loved his job. He was a good police officer, and I was proud to have been his wife during that time. He really kept up with what was going on, and he studied a lot so that he knew what was going on. So as a policeman, he did a good job. But he was a great family man too, and we went to church together. And I was so proud to have had a Christian husband that would read the Bible at home to our children. And so that was a real blessing. And let's see. I didn't finish to tell you that right after he was killed, there was a number of people at the house, and the phone rang, and JD's friend was there, and he picked it up, and he called me and said Robert Kennedy was on the phone. And I went to the phone and said, he said he was sorry about the death of my husband, that if his brother hadn't come to town, that my husband would still be alive. And Owen was over there thinking, my goodness, no telling what I was going to say, because I said, yes, you're right. If he hadn't come to town, JD would still be alive. But the president was doing his job, and JD was doing his. And JD just happened to be killed as well as the president was. So that was, I thought, such a wonderful thing for him to do, to call me. I was just a patrolman's wife, and he called to express his sympathy. And the next day, then Robert Kennedy called me, and Lyndon Johnson called me the next day, and I spoke with him, and he expressed his sympathy. Mrs. Kennedy didn't call me. She sent me a letter. I did talk to, and the letter that she sent was so heartwarming. I would like to read it to you tonight if I thought I'd have brought it and read it. But she expressed her sympathy to me, and she said that she was burning a light in a flame for Jack, and that it would burn forever, and that she would consider that it was burning for my husband too. And think how I felt to hear the president's wife telling me that it would burn forever. So I wanted so badly to go see that flame. And I'd like to tell you a little more about that a little bit later. But then Mrs. Conley called me, and I talked with her, and she sent me 2 dozen roses, and such a sweet lady. Sent me her book, and I appreciated that. And it kept us. You have to stay busy with all the things that you have to do when you got 3 kids. But anyway, we kept things going. And thanks to my friend that lived down the street, because Pansy Anglin, she was there when I needed her. And, when there's a loss, you need your friends, you need the Lord, and somebody that understands. And I had people that come around that understood, and that was really, really touching to me. It really helped me. And so I count it a great pleasure now to talk to some of the ladies that has lost their husbands, because I know what it means to have somebody there that understands, that can share your grief with you, because you need that, and so that's a real pleasure. But I did get to go see that flame, thanks to Corporal Rick Janik, the Dallas Police Department. I got to go see that, and it was wonderful to go and stand there at that flame and know that was burning for my husband too. So it was really nice. The trip was wonderful, thanks to Rick and Corporal Rick Janik. It's been such a blessing to our family, and I'm thankful to him. You have so many people you'd like to thank when things happen. You never get a chance to thank them. but and you never can repay somebody for something they do for you. But you know, God didn't really mean for us to. He means for us to pass it on to somebody else, that we might help somebody else in their time of need. And so I've tried to remember that too, because others, we need to just pass it on and help somebody else as best we can. And see, what else would you going to ask me? Oh, he asked about the site, and yes, I've been to the site several times before, of course, but now that they have that marker there, if you haven't gone by, and go by and see that. It's really nice, and it is at the location where Jody was killed. And I think we needed that as a remembrance to the time when the president was killed, and everybody was in such turmoil, and there was a police officer that was killed there too. So I'm so happy that we have that to remember. And see, is there something else you wanted to ask me? Okay.
How do you want the public to remember your husband?
One thing I want to tell you that I'm happy, so happy about, is that I get to be buried beside Jody. I'm sure y'all seen that in the newspaper. Dave Lieber went to work and got that settled so that I'll get to be buried beside him. There wasn't a space available, they told me, and yet there was spaces. And so he got that cleared up, and I will get to be buried beside him. And that's really, I'm so thankful about that. It's been, it's been a long time since I thought I would. For a long time I thought I would not get to be buried by him, and they told me I would be. So that was a real blessing. I'm just so thankful for that. I want to thank each one of you guys that came out tonight to this get together and honoring me and Jody, because if to thank you for the honor that you showed me, and for each one of y'all that came out tonight to hear me talk. And I just thank you, and it means a lot to me. So thank you so much, and for that honor that you've bestowed upon us. And, you know, I want Jady to be remembered as the good family man that he was, the Christian that he was, the police officer that he was, because he worked 2 jobs besides the police department, at part-time work to see that his family was taken care of and all the bills was paid, and was a good provider in that way. And it was so good that he was able to do that for us and as our family.
I wanted to follow up on the Dave Lieber. Dave Lieber has been on the stage, and some of you might have seen him here, and we're going to try to have him back. She was told there were no spaces next to her husband. Well, Dave Lieber is one of these people. He's a super, super kind, nice person. Don't cross him.
Yes, he is.
He just, shall we say, he made it happen.
Yes, because they had told me when Jetty died that I would be buried beside him. So I'd expected that to happen. But then when my son died and I went down there to talk to them about spaces. They told me there was nothing available at all. And so that's why I was so relieved that they really got involved.
He's the consumer watchdog for the Dallas Morning News. And if something goes wrong, he takes care of it. Tell us about how your husband won the Bronze Star during World War II.
I don't know that. He was, these men, if you have somebody in your family that was in World War II, will they tell you all these things about themselves? They just don't tell you everything. And so he didn't tell me that. But I was so privileged that he did share so many things with me. He told me so many things that I wasn't supposed to know that I'd have to forget everything.
Well, the Bronze Star is not just handed out because you're a nice guy. He did something to earn it.
That's right, he sure did. He was in the Army, and he was a paratrooper and was getting ready to jump over the Rhine River whenever the war ended. So I don't know what might have happened that caused him to win that. He never did tell me that.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Well, you guys tired of hearing me talk?
I first of all want.
I could really tell you more, talk for another hour, but.
Oh, keep talking.
But anyway, I just feel so blessed that y'all came out to share tonight with me, and thank you for coming. It's really, really nice to know that you care.
Can y'all stop the slide at this this was a telegram. Can you back it up and stop it? This was written by Mrs. Tippit to Jackie Kennedy, and it's extremely well written. Keep in mind, in those days, telegrams, you were limited to so many letters, not words, letters. So you made it short. But I thought this was very, very beautifully written. Would you like to read it, or would you like for me to read it?
Go ahead and read
I just think it's wonderful. It's addressed to Mrs. Kennedy. May I add my sympathy to that of the people all over the world. My personal loss in this great tragedy prepares me to sympathize more deeply with you. Isn't that just absolutely beautiful and eloquent?
Thank you.
I would like to. Oh, go ahead.
I got letters from all over the world, and one was so especially precious because it came from a lady in Japan, and she wrote it on silk, and it was beautifully well written. And during the 50th anniversary, I got to meet the man from Japan that is at the United States, and he came down to Dallas, and I got to meet him, and he was telling us that in Japan at that time that the Japanese weren't allowed to study English or talking, anything about Americans. They just wasn't allowed to study it. And yet she was really well studied because it was such a well-written letter. And she expressed her sympathy to me and such a sweet way that was such a precious thing. To know that somebody in Japan, and she had only seen one little sentence. There was just a little sentence that was in the newspaper that she had seen, that she wrote me that letter. And boy, it sure makes you think, do we show enough, do I show enough to someone overseas that has lost a loved one, that to stop and write a letter like that? And that is really, really amazing to me. And
I would like to ask, Mrs. Tippit's family is here tonight. Would y'all like to come down here?
well, you know, I had 3 kids, Jody and I, Alan, Brenda, and Curtis, and my Alan was living with me in 2014. He died with lung cancer. So I moved closer to my youngest boy that I'm so proud of. Curtis Tippit, and his wife Betty.
Do you recall why your father won the Bronze Star?
No, my uncle, I'm sure he shared it with him, but it's like me growing up, I wasn't even aware until about 10 years ago. Like I say, I mean, I didn't really try and research the family, I guess, to say with all the attention and what's happened. I just come to realize that I didn't look into family matters and stuff like that, and so I was just kind of shocked and then overwhelmed when I found out. And but truly, he didn't tell his brothers either. And from what I understand, that generation, a lot of times they refused to get if they wanted to award them a Purple Heart or something. It was a unique generation of people then. But anyway, so yeah, I wish I knew. That's something I would have definitely asked him because I know you had to really kind of like sacrifice and your life to receive that award. But anyway.
Well, Curtis liked 18 days being 5 when he was dead, when his dad died. But Jay would go to the grocery store. He would go run an errand or do something to the car, and he always took Curtis with him. Curtis went wherever. So after Jody had died, I'd go to the store, and he'd tell me how to get home. But of course, the saddest thing to me was that he was set in that window because our house faced the street, and Jay would always come home down that street. So he'd sit in that window in the evening and would look for his dad. And that really wrenches your heart. So,
anything else you would like to share?
None of us really realize, or unless you go through something, anyone, of course, has a loved one that's died suddenly, no matter what it was, a car wreck or anything else. But the shock and the loss is tremendous, and it's. I do thank the Lord for my mom that has been a Christian and really sought to always acknowledge Him and lead me then in that direction. And of course, I would give anything if things would have been different. I often thought about that and dreamed about it, but we can't choose fate in life, and just have to always look to the positive and survive. But anyway, Mom just turned 90 years old last week. So.
Thank you. Thank you. The Lord has really blessed me. I'm the only, in my family, let's see, there was somebody in 1877, they tell me, that lived to be 90. But other than that, nobody's lived to be 90. So when I turned 90, I said, praise the Lord, He's really blessed me, because that is, and I'm so thankful I'm still driving my car, and Curtis don't have to carry me places. And so that's such a blessing.
Curtis, I expressed my sympathy to your mother, but I didn't express sympathy to you. I'm so sorry that what happened to you 55 years ago.
Appreciate it.
Rick, I want you to come down here. Rick, I want you to say a few words.
Well, I'm a retired Dallas police officer, and I joined the police department in 1981, and I stumbled into the historian position. And when I joined the police department in 1981, I would never thought that I would be as close to the Tippit family as I am. This family is almost my second family. There's such a kind family, and I would do anything they can for them to honor JD, because like Tom said, when we started talking about JD and just before the 50th commemoration, there was going to be a lot of honors for President Kennedy because he was President of the United States, but we lost a Dallas police officer that day, and we've all heard tonight, without his actions, that brought the attention to Lee Harvey Oswald, and the coins we did for J.D. Tippit at the top say American Hero. And that should ring forever, that J.D. Tippit was an American hero that brought the attention to Lee Harvey Oswald that day. And I'm blessed to spread that word and be a part of the Tippit family that I am. I got to escort Marie to the police memorial in Washington, D.C. for her first time seeing her husband's name engraved on the police memorial in Washington, D.C. And it startled me when there was a name next to J.D. Tippit. His name is John Kennedy. And John Kennedy was a New York City police officer killed in line of duty. And the gentleman that's in charge of putting all those names out and engraving those names, out of the 3,000 plus names that are on that wall, unfortunately, and that list keeps growing, there's only 2 names intentionally put together, put right side by side, is J.D. Tippit and John Kennedy, for their tie in history forever. And Marie didn't really understand that the gravity and how in law enforcement, that J.D. Tippit's name, and in history, how important it is. And I just am blessed to be part of the family, and I love this family because Curtis and I are like brothers from other mothers. We're both the same, we're both the same year, both the same age, and it's an honor for me to be with the Tippit family and be here tonight. And I said, Chief Harvey was my sergeant. Where's he at? Chief Harvey was my sergeant when he was with the Dallas Police Department, and I love the man to death too. You got a good chief here, so. Just thank this family for their sacrifice. And remember J.D. Tippit. And do go down to the memorial and spend a minute down there just to know that the world changed that weekend. The world changed. That was a world-changing event. And without J.D. Tippit's actions that day and his heroism, it changed again. But there was a bad guy taken off the street. Thank you.
I'm going to come down to the front, and then we'll take questions. Rick, why don't you stay on stage, because you might have
May I say something else?
Yes, sure.
Well, they would all the police officers at that time told me that if Oswald hadn't killed J.D., that he already had his route planned, he would have got away. But as it was, he was killed, and he was caught. Oswald was caught. And, out of all terrible tragedy that happened that day, there was some good things that happened. And one of them was that when I went to Northport, Charlotte, Florida, and was interviewed in Tampa, the Tampa Police Department was telling me that they did not have insurance on their officers when that happened. And because of his death, it caused attention to the fact that they didn't have the insurance, so they got insurance. I don't think the Dallas Police Department did either. And the state didn't give anything to the families until he died. And because of the attention that caused, they do give them something now. So I thought that was wonderful. And, Jetty was out there doing his job just like everybody else. The only difference in him was he was killed by the killer of the president. And so we have so many officers that are being killed now. We had 5 at one time that was killed recently. And so it's so sad to see more names on that register. And so just to say some prayers for these men and women that are out there giving their time and putting their life on the line every day.
This is a library. You can ask what you want, but be polite. Questions, comments, protest? Okay.
I've wondered about the 50,000 letters that were received. Were they all kept in some kind of special file?
Yes, the money you're talking about. The letters were kept in boxes and sent to the family, and we still have boxes of those in a storage building that Curtis has, and we still have the biggest part of them.
Very nice.
No.
Wow.
So we still go through letters, and because they come from all over the world.
And
I still get letters.
Wow.
Occasionally, I'll get a letter from somebody that's overseas, and to think that the people do remember over there, and they're concerned about a Dallas police officer. It really is touching to me that they would do that.
Yes, I think it was a blessing that you got to see your husband again that day. Very unusually, he came home for lunch. Do you remember what time he was there, and what were some of the things you recall talking about that day?
I don't remember exactly what time. I just know it was about an hour later, and the death certificate says that he was dead at 1:18. So he was shot in the temple right here, and the blood was hitting his forehead and running off. He was excited that the president was down, but he said, I can't stay long because the president's here, and we have to, I have to be gone, but go to work. But then he did get to come home for lunch, and it was a short lunch because, but back then, when I realized that he had to stop at a payphone now and call, and we're so used to using our cell phones now, and he had to stop at a payphone to call and tell me that we wanted to come home for lunch. So that was really such a blessing. The Lord knew I needed that. And the night before he was killed, the next day, he come home that evening, and Bill Anglin, one of the police officers that lived 3 doors down, well, he and Jetty put brakes on the car, and then he got the kids' supper, and they washed the dishes, and when I come home from the preschool PTA that I had attended, I was in charge of getting the membership built up, and I worked at that diligently. But anyway, Jay was on the divan with Brenda hanging on to him as usual. She was a daddy's girl. Boy, was she ever. And Curtis was out there with him. So, that's what he was doing the night before. So, he was just busy doing things with the family all the time. He had built a thing across the creek. What do you call that, Curtis? A zip line. A zip line. And they'd get on that thing and ride across the creek. And, he was out there. I don't know how he found the town to play with those kids, because he did have a couple of different jobs that he worked at it, to make some money.
I might add, until Eric Johnson was mayor of Dallas, policemen didn't make about $300-400 a month. Is that correct? And so all policemen had to take part-time jobs to augment income. And when Eric Johnson came on as mayor, he said he was appalled at the pay rate.
I get to look through the payroll cards and to see those all how they would survive on $200, $300, $400 a month is beyond me. But this generation, they did what they did that. They scraped up, they saved, they budgeted their money. A lot of people ask about pictures. Not too many people had cameras back then because they were so expensive, and to have film and to develop the film, on a policeman's salary at $300 or $400 a month. This generation is the greatest generation. They survived this. They were survivors, and that's what they did. They survived.
Well, yeah, you're right. You do have to budget. You did have to budget, and you have to stick with it. And, that's just the way life was.
Also, I believe police officers had to provide their own guns. They bought all their equipment. And ammunition and everything. I mean, it was pretty meager.
Mrs. Tippit, you're an amazing woman, and we thank you for being here tonight to walk us through this, what was a very, very difficult time in your life. Tell us a little bit about how the kids did in all this, and obviously Curtis can address some of the two, and then where is your daughter?
Well, she stays busy working all the time. She comes down and spends the night with me on a Saturday night and goes to church sometimes. And I'm real proud of her. And I'm so proud of Betty and Curtis. Curtis has been the rock I've leaned on, too. So he went to the Dallas Christian and did well there, and is a real Christian family going with that. Alan had a difficult time. He liked about a month and a few days being 14 years old, and he got involved with drugs for a while, and that destroys him. But it was a matter of escaping because he just couldn't face the fact that he had lost his dad. So it was such a terrible time for him. But he was a smoker, so he died with lung cancer. So, but praise the Lord, this one is a devoted Christian young man. He and his wife have raised 8 children, and 8 beautiful children, and I'm so proud of them. Proud of my grandkids, my great-grandkids.
I had the honor of course, the whole family, but Alan, towards the end of his life, finally realized the importance of his dad and the contributions his dad made to this country. And I said, Alan knew he was not long for life, and I told him for years I want to sit with him next to the police memorial at the Police Memorial Day in downtown Dallas. And all of those ceremonies are wonderful, but when I got to see Alan there for the first time, Alan grieved different ways than we did. I told him I was going to get some officers to take him down there and bring him down there, but he said no, he'll come down when he's ready. And that day he showed up, I went and sat next to him, put my arm around him, and I knew right then Alan was coming around to realize how important his dad and his whole family's life is in life. And he died. When he died, he really knew the importance of his father's sacrifice and their family's sacrifice. So he went through a rough period, but at the end, he was at peace. So, and he knew.
He come back to the Lord.
Yep. Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. He came back to Jesus, and that's a comfort to me to know that he's in heaven.
I've got a question, but first, what an honor for you guys the whole world knows your father's name. I think that's amazing. So it probably said at the beginning, but I didn't realize he had come home for lunch at the time. So if it was about an hour, you said, from when he had left, he hadn't heard that, I don't know my timing well enough, the president hadn't been shot, obviously, when he was home for lunch.
Right.
So would he have just heard over the radio the president had been shot and then got a description, and that's why he stopped him? Or can you talk a little bit about how he would have heard the president had been shot and how long after he had left that might have all happened?
Okay, let's see. He had left the house and eaten, and I got in there, cleaned the kitchen up and done things, and so time-wise, I can't tell you time-wise, but they...
I thought the police department called him at the house because they were obviously short on officers, and they called him at the house.
He just left. He just left, and because he just came for a short. He said I couldn't stay because the president's in town, and they required more people to be down, to fill in, because a lot of people, the police had been drawn to LaFille and when he was landing and things like that. And Rick, help me here.
The president was shot at about 12:36, and the description probably wasn't put out till probably about an hour. I don't remember the exact time when it was put out. Of course, like it said in the video, it took a while to narrow down Lee Harvey Oswald as the suspect and then get a description of him. I mean, they had a general idea. So it was probably about 1 o'clock-ish when they put the description out. The last time they heard from J.D. Tippit was at 12:56, I believe it was, and he was shot at 1:18. So the time, I'm sure it was probably 11:30 when he came home, or because cops usually eat about 11, where that's just us. And so it's probably he came home like all officers do. All the officers back here, hey, we don't take that 30 minutes. We're eating and going because that's our job, especially that day. So the timeline. So President Kennedy was shot 12:36. I would say 1 o'clock. The description was put out on the man leaving the scene. Once again, Oswald wasn't. They were looking for a stranger when they sealed off the school book depository. They were looking for a stranger in the building. They were going floor by floor searching and trying to find a needle in a bunch of book school books. That's a big job. So they had the sheriff's department down there. They're doing a floor by floor search. When no strangers showed up, no unknown suspects were found in there, then they started looking at who worked there. Of course, they found the rifle up in the 6th floor. Now they're starting to look at who worked there. So the Dealey Plaza crime scene took a long time. And that's why Oswald was identified later as the shooter of the president. And so they started doing a roll call of all the people that worked there, and guess who was missing? Lee Harvey Oswald. So I got this from Jim today, by the way. I get little tidbits. So they get Lee Harvey Oswald's address. Captain Fritz sends somebody out there. It's a bogus address. Now Captain Fritz knows this is the guy that they're looking for. And so he comes back to the headquarters. Captain Fritz comes back to the headquarters and sees Jim in there and interviewing some guy, and he taps on the window and gets Jim out. And Jim's interviewing Lee Harvey Oswald. And said, Captain, what you need? He says, well, I just came back from the 6th floor of the school book depository. We're looking for a guy named Oswald for the shooting of the president. And Jim's in there talking to him right now. And Jim will say, Jim Lavelle was assigned to the Tippit murder. Jim said, yep, he's my prisoner now. So Captain Fritz took custody of Lee Harvey Oswald. From that point on, he was interviewed for the murder of the President of the United States. So that's kind of the timeline, what happened that day.
And evidently, J.D. must, from what the officers told me at the time, since I wasn't there, but I did get to go and talk to Helen Markham, and she gave me an exact description as to what happened, and I appreciated getting to talk to her. But from what they were saying, Oswald was coming toward the squad car, and and then he turned around and started walking the other way, and he had a coat on, he had a jacket on, and you didn't need a jacket that day. It was a nice day. So I'm sure those must have been some things he observed that caused him to stop him in the first place. Because he worked as a part-timer at Austin's Barbecue, and the fellow there said he was a very cautious officer, and so that's what I gathered, since I wasn't there. But, when something happens and you lose a loved one, you want so bad to know what happened. And so I was blessed to get to talk to Helen Markham, and she did talk to me after I showed her my driver's license and proved to her who I was.
Tell them who Helen was. Tell them who Helen was.
Helen Markham was the lady that was, I think she was talking on the screen earlier, but she was one of the people that was standing there and watching what all happened. And she said that as soon as he shot Judy, that he turned the gun at her, and she put both hands up like that. And she could still see what he was doing through her hands. But Mr. Bowley was the one that called in on the radio, wasn't he, Rick? Temple Bowley. And he called in on the radio because he had stopped there and had his 12-year-old daughter with him. And I asked him, I said, "You mean you stopped there with your daughter with you?" And I wouldn't want her to see that. And he said he had parked where she could only see Jody's feet. And he went and called in on the radio so that they knew where and what was going on.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, Captain Fritz was one tough, smart, street cop. And if, this is my opinion only, if everybody had left him alone, he'd have made sure Oswald got to the county jail safely. That man was tough. He had grown up through Bonnie and Clyde and those days of bootlegging and so forth. He was tough. And let me tell you, if he had been left in charge, things would have been different.
Have you communicated with Marina Oswald through the years?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't, sir.
Have you seen this car since it's been refurbished?
Yes, I have. Sure have. I'm so appreciative of that being restored, and it's really a great blessing to have that for historical reasons.
Where is it?
It's a police association, Rick, isn't it?
The original car that J.D. Tippit was driving was used that same night after the crime scene was processed, and just they were done with the crime scene. So somebody drove it back to the police substation, and one of our sergeants who recently retired, he was the relief officer for that car. So the car was actually put back in service the same day, and a month later it was totaled in a accident, and it was destroyed. And the only thing that really has survived that we can determine is the siren. And the siren was bought in an auction, and a gentleman in East Texas has the siren, which we think it was the siren. But the car that J.D. Tippit was driving that day does no longer exist. The replica that sits down at the Dallas Police Association headquarters was a movie car, and that was used as a Tippit car in a movie in 1974, the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. And so it's the one at the Dallas Police Association is an exact replica of the J.D. Tippit car in honor of J.D. Tippit, and that was part of my passion to get that car there, and I'm proud to have that car there to honor J.D. Tippit forever. I wish they would have kept the car, but
earlier you said that one of JD's friends came to the house afterward. Was that Sergeant William Menzel or Carl Mather or both?
No, the man that was there that answered that phone was Owen Box, and of course there was several of the officers in and out for the next few days, continually. But Owen Box was a real good friend of his, and another officer, and he and his wife were over there. And then Bill Anglin and his wife lived down the street, 3 doors down. And so, yeah, there was so many people that came by.
What does JD stand for? Was he just JD?
That's just an initial name. And back then, they named people just initials. His granddad's name was UG. So it doesn't stand for anything. One time we went over to Sears and applied for a loan, and he told him his name was J.D. Tippit. And they said, okay, you have to have a name. And he said, that's my name. And so they said no, and they gave him and just made up a name, and put down on the piece of paper. So he laughed about that later and said, well, do I really have to pay this? It's not my name.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah, we had to pay it.
I was riding around with my grandfather when I was 16 in his truck, and we were talking about different things. And he was talking. I asked him about the name, and he said, well, when he was in school, and of course he was born in 1902, so there was some book, or it must have been a story in a book, because we've tried to find the book. It was called like J.D. of the Mountain, and it was like he was a mountain man and did all this stuff, and he just remembered it as a kid. And so when he got married and had a son, then he just named him from what he remembered and thought was cool. But anyway.
It's an odd way to find a name, wasn't it?
What was your reaction when you found out that, or when you heard or saw that Jack Ruby had shot Lee Harvey Oswald?
Shock and disbelief, and they. So he had killed 2 people. So I never got bitter about it. There was no point in getting bitter about it at all. It wouldn't have brought J.D. back. So, so I didn't get that emotional about it. It was by him killing him, we didn't have to go through all these trials it would have had to have been and so forth. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad, because if he'd lived, we might have found out something. I doubt it, but we might have.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm interested in the fire that you were talking about that Jacqueline Kennedy had going. Where was it, and what did it look like?
Arlington National Cemetery, where Kennedy's body's buried. There's a right there at the headstone or whatever. There's a flame that's there burning, an eternal flame, and so that's what she's making reference to. So anyway,
right.
Kennedy's burial spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really odd. You walk up to it, and Rick Janik over there was the one that took me over there. And you walk up to it, and there's that flame burning. And it's just a flame coming out of the ground, and it's burning. And she did that in honor of her husband. And for her to tell me that she would consider that it was burning for my husband too, wasn't that a nice honor that she paid him? Yeah. To remember him? Jacqueline Kennedy was really a amazing lady, I thought.
If you'll Google President Kennedy's gravesite, you'll see the flame.
Yeah.
And it's been burning for 55 years.
Yes. It don't seem like it's been 55 years, but it has.
I just wanted to tell you, I'm a native Dallasite, and we moved out of Texas about a month before your husband was killed. We moved to Akron, Ohio. And, of course, Dallasites were kind of blamed for the assassination in a way, but I just mainly wanted to tell you that every November 22nd, I always think of your husband and Kennedy, and I think all of us natives do. And I just want to say I'm sorry about what happened to your father and husband.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For your remembrance and your prayers.
And I have a cousin who was born on that day, too, which is not so great.
I was just wondering, we're still writing books about that day and all the things that were happened. And I wonder, were there ever authors that came to you and asked you if you had some opinion or some thoughts about why your husband was murdered that day?
Why he was murdered that day?
Now, I just wondered, because there's so many books written about that day, if different people doing research had come and talked to you. I was just wondering.
No, I don't talk to those people.
Okay.
It's a shame they can't believe the truth.
I always wanted to know approximately how far away Oswald was from the crime scene of President Kennedy, from where your husband was murdered. Approximately how far away were they in distance? Okay, thank you.
He said about a half mile. As I recall the story, he got on a bus and then took a cab.
Oswald left I think she was referring to the crime scene where Tippit was murdered. It was from the 10th and Patton to the Texas Theater. It's about a half a mile. Oswald ran down an alley, and that's when they took off his jacket, and he popped up back on Jefferson Street. So it's about a half a mile, but he ran down the alleys because, of course, he just murdered a police officer. And thank goodness for Mr. Brewer and his alert watching activity going on. And he mentioned about the Dallasites, the citizens of Dallas right in Oak Cliff. I mean, they were so wonderful that day. The 4 witnesses that saw the offense when the officer was killed. And then Mr. Brewer, who was minding his own business in his shoe store, listening to the radio, hearing the police cars going down Jefferson to the crime scene. But then he looks out and sees a man coming down the street in the opposite way, where the cars were going. And he said that he didn't act normal. Because normally when you're going to see a squad car pass you, you're going to look, where are they going to? He said Oswald didn't do that. Oswald ducked in his shoe store till all the squad cars were gone, and then kept going towards the Texas Theater. And without the alertness of the citizens in Oak Cliff that day, they helped put Oswald in that Texas Theater. Mr. Brewer even went to the Texas Theater with the officers to point Oswald out. And he walked in the back door with an officer, and they said, that's him in the seat. He didn't do it that obvious, but because they didn't want to alert Oswald that they were there, they went row by row, kind of just checking everybody. And then when they got to Oswald, Oswald stands up, and the fight was on. So, but he pulled his gun, and that's when the pile-on started. There was a fight in that Texas Theater. There was a big fight. There was about 10 officers that had converged in the Texas Theater, and Oswald was a fighter. So it was a knockdown, drag-out fight. He just killed a policeman. So now Oswald left the Texas Theater, got on a bus, wasn't able to make it out of the downtown because of the traffic, because of the motorcade. So he jumps in a cab, gets dropped off 5 blocks from his house. Okay. And he runs to his house, grabs his gun, and leaves leaves the house and takes off on foot. Where he was going, Oswald only knows. Oswald only knew. So.
Did you want to comment on that?
No, he covered it.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, but also I wanted to know. I lost my train of thought. Yes. Oh, his personal life. What type of life did Oswald have before all this?
It's a long story.
The Cliff Notes version. Oswald was a publicity seeker. He was had a temper. He was living in Dallas, and the history shows that he had a violent nature towards his wife. That's why she was living in Irving, and he was living in Dallas. And he was a hothead. He was a publicity seeker. He was trying to make a name to be in the history books. And well, he did. And so that's Oswald was just an evil person. And so, and his even wife said, "Dad, Lee was kind of crazy." To quote her, he was kind of crazy.
Let me get this man first. By the way, since I'm walking back here, people blame Dallas for Kennedy's death. Oswald had only been in Dallas about 2 months.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Abraham Zapruder took that film showing the Kennedy assassination, and when he sold it, he made a gift to your family. Did you ever meet or talk to Mr. Zapruder?
No, I never got a chance to talk to him.
Hold your mic up.
Oh, I never got a chance to talk to him. I really appreciated what he'd done for us, though, and to think that he donated $10,000 of that money to the
That was a lot of money in those days.
Yes, it was.
I don't know who to direct this towards. I don't know, maybe the historian, but it's for the funeral of your husband. Why was there no flag covering his coffin? I just saw the pictures of it.
I didn't hear him.
The question was, and that was a very good question. And in 2012, when we were planning to honor J.D. Tippit, we asked Marie for the flag that he was given at his funeral, as we all customarily have. And due to J.D. was a veteran, so I thought for sure we had a flag somewhere. And I posed a question to young Marie here, and she just looked at me, and I was like, they never gave J.D. Tippit a flag. Could you think about it? The incident happened on Friday, funeral's on Monday. The world-changing event that happened those 3 days, that protocol was overlooked. Sadly, but overlooked.
Why?
And I asked our family service officer what happened. Who's supposed to make that happen? He said the funeral director. And it just was overlooked. So when I heard that information, I checked, I saw the film, I went to Chief Brown. I said, we never gave Marie Tippit a flag. And that broke my heart.
So was there no 21-gun salute or anything like that?
Was there a 21-gun salute at the funeral? I don't think there was a 21-gun salute at the funeral myself. We just didn't have that protocol back then. But in 2013, during the 50th commemoration of Officer Tippit's sacrifice, Chief David O'Brown, the attractors as he had, but I tell you what, that day he knelt in front of this young lady right here and gave her a folded American flag, and I said, okay, life is good. Then we went to the military, because JD was a veteran, and we had a ceremony down at Adamson High School right behind where J.D. Tippit was killed. And their ROTC unit gave the families military flags, as they should have done 50 years ago, but protocol just wasn't followed back then as precise as we do it now. Because I looked at that tape going, man, there's no flag there. That broke my heart. It really did. And when Chief Brown gave her that flag, I said, I'm okay now. So it was just overlooked because of the gravity of the whole, what was going on in the world in the United States that day. Like somebody said, hey, they had the president's funeral first, JD's Tippit after. That wasn't planned. That was just a roll of the dice that day. Because that was happening in Washington. We were doing our grieving in Dallas. It just happened. You got to just keep it simple back then. It was just simple times back then. But it was overlooked. But we rectified it. 50 years, but we rectified it.
I keep on thinking that if the shell over the Continental that the Kennedys were in was put on, all this wouldn't have happened, right? And was this mentioned that he would not be having that protection before the parade? Was it a last-minute decision? I don't really recall that.
Those decisions are made not on the police department level. The police department in these dignitary protection assignments are limited to the motorcade route, providing security up and around. That decision was not made by the Dallas Police Department, and there was a lot of, and nobody, and Jim mentions this a lot in his presentations. When the president was killed, that was the state of Texas that was taking that case. And the FBI, the Secret Service, and all the other federal agencies are going, wait, it's the President of the United States. It's our investigation. It's ours. But it was not against the federal law at that time in 1963 to kill the President of the United States.
See, if Oswald had lived, it would have been Texas versus Oswald.
So at that point in time, those decisions, just like the decision to charge Oswald, was a state of Texas. That decision it could have saved him, but President Kennedy was a very with the people. He wants to be with the people. They stopped in the motorcade to shake hands with people, with nuns and with school kids. So the bubble top, but that was their decision.
Can I add to that at 8 o'clock that morning, I was walking out the door and it was raining, and there was a raincoat on. My mother stopped me and said, "I just heard on the weather that the rain is going to quit in about an hour. We're going." All I knew is we were out of school, so I took my raincoat off. If the rain had continued for about 15 more minutes, they would have put the bubble on, because it takes an hour to put the bubble on. It's not just something you slap on there. It's bolted and so forth. And the rain quit. The president, like he said, it was the president's decision. He really wanted to interact with people, kiss their babies, that kind of thing, and shake their hands. And the decision was made not to put the bubble on when the rain quit. If the rain had stayed just a little bit more, they would have put it on anyways, because there was no turning back at that point. It's had neither the county or the city made that decision. I talked to the Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes. He came here about 10 years ago, and he talked about that very thing, that the timing was just like this. They heard the same report that my mother heard. And so I was as close to you as I was the president that day at Dallas Love Field. And I saw that limousine, and he wasn't at Love Field very long. And then he got in that limousine and drove off. He had been shot before we got out of the airport, because the crowd, it was one of the biggest crowds except for the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, that airport ever had. And it was just humongous. So everybody was walking like very slowly, and the cars were leaving very slowly. And we heard about it before we even... So they whisked him out of there pretty soon. And, of course, he was on a motorcade and got to downtown pretty quickly. But that decision about the bubble was one of those unfortunate fates that no one really knew was going to happen. So do you want to add to any of that?
And it is against the federal law now to kill the President of the United States.
Yes. It would now be the USA versus Oswald.
Right.
But at those days, it was a state crime.
That was the big fight between the state of Texas, the Dallas County, the Dallas Police Department, whose jurisdiction it was. And they fought it all. I mean, the Dallas Police Department was like, no, this is our case. We're keeping it here. Even the Dallas County prosecutors were like, this is our case. And the powers that be said, no, not now. It's ours. So.
Well, I'm a native Dallasite also, and I was at Love Field that day also, and I took a picture of them driving by. I was on the corner by the Coca-Cola bottling company, standing right there, and took a picture of them, but they were driving very slowly by there. I could have reached out and touched the car. And then about the timing of it, my father was with me, and we drove home, and I lived on Martell off of Greenville Avenue. And by the time I got home, and the thing we did then was watch As the World Turns. And when I turned it on, the TV, they said Kennedy being shot. And I said, how can that be? I just saw him. So.
I'll take one more question. Any last questions, comments? Protest?
Up front.
Up
front.
There we are.
I just wanted to say you've all been so gracious, and I've really enjoyed it. And I'm so sorry for your loss, but very appreciative for all of you.